Hey guys, welcome to this revision video on Hebb's theory of learning and neuronal growth. We're going to go through really quickly everything you need to know for the GCSE in terms of outlining this theory and evaluating the theory, trying to keep it quite simple. So basically, Hebb was a psychologist that came up with an idea about how when you keep learning something over and over again, at a cellular level, something starts happening to your neurons. So the first thing that he pointed out was that when you actually start learning something brand new, your brain will start making brand new connections. If you look under a microscope, you can actually see these connections being made. Now, when you repeat that learning, that same thing, whatever it is, maybe you've started a new sport or a new dance, every time you do the same action, the same neurons will fire over and over again because your brain is going through the same process. These neurons start to work together and they're called a cell assembly. Now, again, when you keep repeating that same bit of learning or that same skill or, just whatever it is that you're doing, you keep repeating the activity or the learning, that cell assembly will keep firing. And when they keep firing, the neurons involved will grow larger, which basically means that the pathway in the brain, all the connections that are involved with that activity or that skill or that bit of learning, that pathway becomes stronger, more efficient, larger, which means it will transfer information faster, which ultimately makes you better or quicker or more efficient at that task. So that is the reason why your athletes and your sort of rock stars or musicians become so good at what they do because they practice and practice and practice. The cell assemblies keep firing and firing and firing, and the neurons get bigger and bigger and bigger. So at a simplified level, this flowchart kind of summarizes it. So when you make a new connection, because you start learning something new, you make a cell assembly. Then you do repeated learning, so the cell assembly keeps firing. The neurons grow bigger and bigger. The pathway becomes stronger, and we become more efficient at the task. So if I was going to describe it for the exam, because I had a question like describe Hebb's theory of learning and neuronal growth, we're going to need to explain what happens when learning happens in the neurons. So in terms of new connections, we need to mention sort of the keywords like cell assemblies, the repetition, keep exciting, when the neurons keep exciting each other, that they grow. And we need to mention how the pathways get bigger, stronger, and more efficient. So an answer would look something like this. Hebb said that when new learning occurs, new connections are made in the brain. These connections work together and are called cell assemblies. When they are repeatedly fired, it causes the neurons to grow. As they grow, the neural pathways become stronger and faster. This means we become better at the task. Hopefully, that's not too complicated. Now, in terms of evaluating the theory, there's a couple of things that we could say. As we're looking at the brain, we could firstly talk about brain scans, and we can see that the idea that neurons grow as they get used repeatedly is supported by brain scans. Brain scans will show that a person's neurons do strengthen and grow if they're used lots. In class, we looked at an example of a person that spent hours and hours learning the number of pi, and we saw that as they got to the 1,000th time that their brain and their neurons were much larger and much more active. This theory has really good applications to the education section because we now know that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, your neurons will get bigger and you'll get better at whatever it is that you're trying to learn. So when you are doing your revision, it's not just a case of people going, revise, because if you keep doing it, you'll learn it better. There's actually cellular, molecular evidence going on that your neurons will be bigger and therefore you will find it much easier to remember things. So this is good for students and teachers that are trying to get ready for exams. However, it is considered a little bit reductionist as it is talking about how learning happens in only one way. There are lots of ways that learning can happen. It's quite a complicated process, learning. Maybe there are other ways that we could learn things. For example, we always talk about flashbulb memories. Flashbulb memories are those types of memories which are so strong and emotional that there is no repetition involved. So how do those memories become so strong without repeated firing? So that shows that you can learn things without repeated firing. But also Piaget talks about how children learn through experiences with assimilation and accommodation, and that's not necessarily repeated learning and repetition of neurons firing, that's just new experiences. So perhaps there are other ways of learning things that Hebb's theory ignores. So preparing for the exam, you could expect something like this: evaluate Hebb's learning, theory of learning and neuronal growth. So you've got to remember always to go through the two-step process for an evaluation. State what it is that your evaluation is, and make sure you actually explain why it's an evaluation. So something like this would be really good. One strength to Hebb's theory is that it is supported by brain scan evidence. Yep, nice. But you've got to explain it with a bit of an example or a bit of explanation. Brain scans show us that as a person repeatedly learns the same content over and over, their brain activity increases and becomes larger. This supports the idea that neurons get bigger as we repeat something. So take our evaluations from the last slide, rewind if you need to, and you need to turn them into like a 2-sentence point and explanation. Right, guys, that's Hebb's theory. That's everything you need to know to get yourself a good grade there. Make sure you know the theory, make sure you can evaluate it, and that's everything about Hebb's theory.